Paklenu pomorandžu sam napisao 1961. godine. Sada sa sigurnošću mogu reći još u davna vremena. Neki ljudi su kasnije strpljivo čekali da vide da li će knjiga biti proročka.
Will you welcome, please, the father of the Clockwork Orange, a Clockwork Orange, Mr. Entonија Berđesa.
Entonија Berđesa is, of course, the author of A Clockwork Orange, a fantasy of sadism and psychological manipulation, which, notwithstanding the sex and the gore, or who knows, perhaps in part because of it, got the New York Film Critics Award as the best movie of last year.
A Clockwork Orange is an extremely political novella.
We were seeing all the signs that made the novel a sort of written cartoon exaggeration of what was about to be.
I think the book and the film are both much misunderstood. And a lot of people only remember the first section, the crime section. Within a year of the film being released, Berđesa has decided to produce a new manuscript called The Clockwork Condition. The manuscript was discovered after his death. It's a sort of collage. It's a puzzle. Berđesa is justifying the novel and the film against the accusations that were made against it.
Našao sam se u situaciji da sam izazvan da objasnim značenje knjige, ali i filma, a moje tumačenje je bilo sledeće.
Bili smo tu ja, Alex i moja 3 ortaka Pete, George i Dim. Sedeli smo u baru po imenu Krava. Muljali smo po glavi šta ćemo da radimo sa svojim vremenom. Napolju je oštro sekla prokleto tamna, ledena i suva zima. Naš 4 smo bili odeveni po poslednjoj modi, a u to vreme to je podrazumevalo da na sebi imate crne uske pantalone i štitnik koji se urezivao u međunoži. Služio je kao zaštita, a dizajn se video na jakom svetlu. Kosu smo nosili ni suviše kratku, ni suviše dugu, a na nogama smo imali cokule za šutiranje.
Clockwork Orange is the story of a young man, a teenager, Alex, who is what would be called in English, though the word comes from the Irish, of course, a hooligan or a kind of, a juvenile delinquent. It's set in a kind of dystopic near future. The novel was written in 1960. It's set in the early 1970s. It's kind of set in poor residential districts.
The first part of the novel shows Alex and his droogs on a sort of crime spree. Various different attacks on people, physical violence, but also sexual attacks.
Some people want to interpret, Alex outside the law, Alex from the law.
When Alex listens to Beethoven, he becomes more aggressive, and it drives him on to further and worse criminality.
I'm with him, and I judge him, and I'm scared for him. But in the way that we adore our Greek heroes, someone that invokes pity and fear. I love you, but also I'm scared of you, and I wouldn't want to be you. I'm sorry for you, but also, oh, you shouldn't have done that. Macbeth.
Ce qui est très fort dans le livre, c'est que ce sont des gamins, lui et ses droogs. Ses camarades, ils ont 15 ans. Ce qui rend Alex attachant, c'est cette maturité à 15 ans. Évidemment, c'est pas ses exactions, c'est pas le fait qu'il viole, qu'il tue, mais il est dans une logique imparable, et ça pourrait être presque comme un espèce d'artiste, apprenti artiste, qui voudrait mettre en scène le mal suprême, dont il serait un peu l'acteur principal, l'instigateur. Il est le mal par rapport aux règles qui sont établies, qu'on essaie de suivre tous.
Then Alex ends up in jail. And it's not juvenile court, it's big boy jail.
While he's in prison, he learns that there's a new treatment, the Ludovico technique, which will get you out of prison early, but it will burn out the capacity of the individual to commit crime. And he volunteers for this treatment where he's going to be brainwashed. It's a classic novel about the conflict between the individual and the state, which is similar in its thinking to Orwell's 1984, the great dystopias. The novel's unusual because it's narrated in what is quite a seductive way by a first-person narrator. Alex, who's describing very exciting things. He makes crime and violence seem exciting. And the vividness of those first-person descriptions place you precisely within the scene that's being described.
You see the world through his eyes and you recognize why he does it. And you wouldn't do it, but you get it.
I first read A Clockwork Orange when I was 15 years old. I was so convinced by the first-person narrative of Alex in the novel that I thought this was the work of somebody who'd lived those experiences. This was probably the confession of a murderer who had written his book when he was in prison.
Well, I think to understand context for Clockwork Orange, you have to start with its writer. Entonија Berđesa is a lower middle-class Catholic from Manchester. And that's a very, very particular social place to come from.
I began my life as a kind of orphan in that at the end of the First World War, in 1918, the influenza epidemic which ravaged Europe, ravaged this city particularly, and in 1 week my mother and my sister died. Indeed, my father came home from his barracks in Preston to find both my mother and my sister lying dead on the bed, on their respective beds, while I was gurgling in my cradle. I was obviously destined for something, God knows what, but for something.
This is the manuscript of Berđesa's unfinished book, The Clockwork Condition, written in 1972 and 1973. Berđesa talks about the genesis and composition of his Clockwork Orange novel. And then he attempts to define what he means by the clockwork condition, perpetual conflict, he says, between good and evil. I think the big theme that emerges from this manuscript is the importance of the artist as the figure who can help us make sense of the bigger world. A philosophical reflection on the human condition.
Ne mislim da je to moja najbolja knjiga, ali ona mnogo toga otkriva o konfliktu između dobra i zla, kao i o strahu od bezumnog nasilja. Na mnogo načina ova knjiga sam ja sam. Ona predočava skrivenu borbu koja se u čoveku vodi i tiče se postojanja zla. Tragično je to da kao nešto sasvim normalno doživljavamo dnevne vesti i izveštaje kao i slike koje pokazuju realnost nasilja. Verujem da je ne samo pravo, već i dužnost umetnika da šokira, ukoliko smatra da je to potrebno da bismo se zamislili nad čovečanstvom i njegovom sudbinom.
Burgess grew up in Manchester, which is an industrial city in the northwest of England. And during the Depression in the 1930s, it was quite a poor place. And by reputation, it's been quite a violent place as well. There were gangs when he was a boy, famous for their use of cutthroat razors. So there was violence around him, and I suppose some of that is possibly reflected in the novel.
Same building, the same yard. God, I can see myself being knocked over there by other kids, running around. Exactly the same. Look at it. It's not changed much now. And this is junk. God alone knows.
Clockwork Orange, as much as any cultural product of the post-war period in England, is marked by this post-imperial experience, by a collapsing back into itself of English culture, by a fear of America and a fear of the Americanization of English culture.
In 1959, Berđesa noticed very profound changes to British culture and society. Youth culture reflected those influences like Marlon Brando and his film On the Waterfront, and James Dean in Rebel Without a Cause. And in Britain, this was also reflected in what they called the Teddy Boys. This caught his attention and his imagination when he began to think about writing a novel about young people in the future.
U britanskoj štampi se mnogo govorilo o rastućoj stopi kriminala. Mladi su krajem 50-ih godina bili nemirni i bezobzirni, što je posljedica nezadovoljstva nastalog tokom posleratnog perioda, koji je zapravo bio nasilan i destruktivan. Naravno, nije slučajno da je besmislena i bezumna agresija bila imanentna tadašnjoj omladini. Prirodno je da mladi koji još nemaju osjećaj odgovornosti i smisla posjeduju sirov libido i energiju. Zbog toga, oni predstavljaju savršen primer savremenog varvarstva. Mladi u Paklenoj pomorandži su puni energije koja se ne može iskoristiti konstruktivno, te je zato oni koriste za destrukciju.
At the time he was writing in 1960, 1961, there was a different kind of culture that was coming through. First of all, drug culture, and people often forget that A Clockwork Orange is a novel about drugs.
Milk bar Krava bilo je mesto gde ste pored mleka mogli da nabavite štošta. Nisu imali dozvolu za točenje alkohola, ali još nije bio donet zakon protiv točenja viskoze koji su nekada stavljali u moloko. Zato ste mogli da ga stuknete brzinski sa velocetom, sintemeksom, drenkromom ili drugim drogama.
Entонија Berđesa grew up playing the piano in his parents' pub to entertain people. So there's lots of stuff on intoxication and alcohol and a culture of intoxication in Clockwork Orange. That's because Berđesa grew up in an actual pub, watching people getting drunk.
In Manchester, you had to get drunk. You didn't know you were having a good time until you were drunk. You couldn't say, right, you know, I'm still capable. I'm enjoying this 17th glass of beer. You had to wait till it was no longer possible to estimate how you felt. If you forgot what had happened the night before. Then you knew you'd had a good time.
In many ways, this anticipates the drug culture which hadn't yet happened in Britain. Throughout the 60s, there's a sense that the novel is gaining popularity in the underground. So people like the Beatles had read it, and there was talk of trying to set up a film version which might have involved the Rolling Stones.
I did not create the bad boy image of the Rolling Stones. But when I read A Clockwork Orange, I knew I could use it because Keith Richards, Mick, and me, we needed ammunition to keep us emboldened against all the people in the press and the public who were not wishing us well. A Clockwork Orange captured the rhythm of our life. Most books on the youth and music don't have the rhythm, but I mean, I was taken with the language, the formation of the language.
You invented a language for the book, and I didn't realize that a lot of the words, the slang in the book comes from Russian.
Yes, well, when I first was writing the book, I had to write it in slang because it was in the first-person narrative. So I had to invent a slang which wouldn't be out of date because it didn't exist. And I tried very hard to make a slang. And then I went to Russia, to Leningrad, and I saw they had the same problem there that we have in the West. They have teenage violence. Indeed, I was involved in it. 4 o'clock in the morning in a cafe. They used to call them stiljagi, style boys. You know, well-dressed, like our own teddy boys in England. And I thought, here's the answer. Youth stands above politics. Youth is above the Iron Curtain. Youth is an international third force. Let's combine Russian youth and Western youth, turn them into a composite kind of being, and gel their languages, and produce a language which is, in fact, a combination of Russian and English.
Да. Нет. Пожалуйста.
Natsat is the language that the characters speak, which is kind of based, grounded in English, but it's peppered with words such as drug, which means friend in Russian. Well, obviously, Korova is the name of the bar, means cow, and the substance that they drink, moloko, means milk. So Berges, apart from being a wonderful novelist, he was also a linguist, and he needed something pretty in your face.
Май, июнь, июль, август, сентябрь.
Die in your own good time, you Grozny starry Farella. All I desire is like share and share alike, like me and my droogs have a malenki dollop of његову. Jobless? Ah, yes. Not one lump-tick of deng in our empty garments. That literally means not one little bit of money in our empty pockets. Some of those words sound more violent than the real words that they mean. Some of those words are innately violent themselves. Tolchocking means smacking on the head. Tolchocking, it sounds like what it is. Oh, it's so good, isn't it? I forgot how good the book is. I'm in love with it. Oh, my God.
It was a freedom manifesto. The Korova bar, we really wanted to be in that bar. We wanted to be juvenile delinquents. We wanted to be Alex and his friends. We wanted to order drinks and we wanted to misbehave.
Well, you know the solution. There are certain urgencies, political urgencies, to be candid. And I have every confidence in Brodsky.
You do get a burst of energy, which overboils, which just goes over the top.
More badnesses of the self, the one, the you, or me, on our oddie knockers. And that self is made by all... What the language in Clockwork Orange is good poetry in English. And Berges was a great Shakespearean.
Et là, on avait des domis, genre anciens vraiment terribles, genre vieux colonel maigre à grande gueule, et à Badine, les vieilles tsitsas, damas sourdingues à chat, et qui, mes frères, n'avaient jamais été touchés par un seul tcholoviek.
In fiction, or in any kind of verbal art, words should be one of the characters. Words should be characters. Language should be a character in itself.
The language of the novel achieved what the lyrics of rock and roll had been doing. You said bebop-a-lula to your parents, and you had the same unity of the language of A Clockwork Orange in that no one understood what you were talking about, which was fine.
Konačno smo stigli pred nekakvo seoce. Tik ispred nabasali smo na kućerak. Upali smo na glavačke u sobu. Čuli smo glas. Ko ste vi? Kako se usuđujete da uđete u moju kuću bez dozvole? Na stolu je stajala pisaća mašina. Papiri su bili raštrakani unaokolo, ali na jednoj gomili su se nalazile sređene stranice, pa mi se učinilo da ih je taj druškan nedavno otkucao. Za sve to vreme jedna devuška, njegova verna ljuba, stajala je ukočena kraj kamina. U redu je, Dime, rekoh. Sad da krenemo dalje. Stisnuo je devušku, zgrabivši joj obe ruke dok sam joj ja kidao komade odeće, ostali su navijali i zavijali.
Bilo bi prijatnije i stekli bismo više pristalica da nije bilo nasilja. Ali priča o Aleksovoj rehabilitaciji izgubila bi na snazi da nam nije bilo omogućeno da vidimo šta ga je dovelo u tu situaciju.
That sense of youth and freshness and language and excitement and dressing up and violence and crime. It's a very rich, very potent cocktail, I think. So eventually, in 1966, Berges sold the film rights to Warner Brothers and Stänlија Kјubrik 3 years later.
Will you welcome, please, Entонија Берџеса.
Berges was not involved with the making of the film in any way, but Berges had agreed to speak on behalf of Kјubrik, because Kјubrik gave a few interviews and then became silent.
Fairly unambitious film.
This was a monumental film, and a monumental part, Alex.
I went there with about 15 or 16 other punks, and we were blown away by the film. The great Ludwig van, classic music would inspire people to do bad things. It was exactly the opposite was what our parents told us about classic music.
And the sort of scandal that had surrounded Kubrick's film adaptation was real and present in the kind of mythology of young people, of teenagers in the 1970s. Kubrick turns the violence into farce and into, you know, he speeds up the action of the film. He does it in speeded up motion. This looks like funny Buster Keaton or a Charlie Chaplin film. You know, so there's an inclination to think, well, maybe, should I laugh at this? Should I laugh at these young men raping a woman? Is it funny?
The earliest reviews in America suggested this was a fascist film. There was a lot of fear and panic.
It was a double-edged sword, wasn't it? Because when Stенlија Kјубrika had the rights for the film, it became Stенlија Kјубrika's A Clockwork Orange. And it was literally called that. Malcolm McDowell, seminal actor, amazing performer, played an Alex that Anthony didn't really write. He was a man, not a boy. It's glamorous, sexy, charismatic, but it doesn't speak to the novella. It's not his. But yet its popularity is what put Entonија Berɖesa on the map. Really heartbreaking.
Does it bother you that the work that you're most renowned for, of all the books that you've written, is A Clockwork Orange?
It does annoy me a good deal because I became associated with violence chiefly because of the film, and if a couple of nuns were raped in Berwick-on-Tweed, I would always get a telephone call from a newspaper, you know, Mr. Burgess, what do you think of this? Do you not feel in some measure responsible? So in consequence, they've turned me into a kind of expert on violence, which I really know nothing about.
Within a year of the film being released, on both sides of the Atlantic, in Britain and America, there were reported to be a series of copycat crimes. Young people dressing up as characters from the film, and in one case there was a homeless man who was kicked to death.
Tout s'est déroulé comme dans un cauchemar et le scénario rappelle étrangement celui d'Orange Mécanique, mais la scène...
Orange Mécanique, c'est employé par des journalistes qui n'ont pas lu le livre, à mon avis, mais simplement le terme est entré en langage courant comme une espèce de société où la violence est capable de se substituer au langage. On va dire que c'est un peu ça, hein.
Berđesa did feel very hurt by that because he was in the firing line.
Ono što je meni bilo mučno, kao i Kjubriku, jesu optužbe koje su gledaoci i čitaoci Paklene pomorandže upućivali kao kritiku. Uveravali su publiku da smo se sa uživanjem upustili u prikazivanje nasilja i da ga propovedamo i zagovaramo na gotovo pornografski način. Meni, naravno, nikako nije bilo zadovoljstvo da u romanu opisujem sve to zlostavljanje i surovost. Uronio sam u preterivanje, u karikaturu, čak sam izmislio i sleng, argo govor, da bih u svojoj knjizi tom činu pristupio više na simboličan nego naturalistički način.
He didn't think that art created evil in the real world. He thought that evil was a thing and it existed and it was the duty of the artist to describe it and write about it.
Piskaralo i njegova ženica kao da više nisu bili prisutni. Bili su krvavi i iscepani i krkljali su na podu pred nama, ali bar su još uvek bili živi. To je knjiga, rekoh. Ti pišeš knjigu. Divio sam se svakome ko je mogao da napiše knjigu. Pogled mi se spustio na početak teksta i na naziv Paklena pomorandža. Rekao sam, to ti je baš glupsonski naslov. Ko je ikada čuo za nešto što se zove Paklena pomorandža? Počeo sam da cepam stranice i razbacujem ih po podu.
Čitaoci moje knjige se možda sete da je pisac čija je žena silovana takođe autor dela koje se zove Paklena pomorandža. Što se mene tiče, takvo naturalističko opisivanje nasilja bilo je čin katarze koliko i čin milosrđa. Moja žena je tokom zamračenja u Drugom svetskom ratu 1942. godine i sama bila žrtva nasilja, jer su je jedne noći napala i pretukla 3 vojna dezertera. U to vreme nosila je naše dete i bila je prinuđena da abortira zbog šoka koji je tada doživela. Od toga je doba patila od jakih unutrašnjih krvarenja, a na kraju je i preminula od posledica tog događaja.
The child she was carrying, who was a boy, would have been In 1962, when the novel was published, he would have been 18, which is the same age as Alex at the end of the novel. And you might speculate about who is this character Alex? Might he be a representation of Burgess's own son, who died during the war?
Sada kreće zaista srceparajući i tragični deo priče, braćo moja, moji prijatelji. Eto me u Drzaću, što će reći državnom zatvoru broj 84F.
Then Alex ends up in jail, and this is what the minister says. The situation is appalling. As he says, an endemic problem, overcrowding. Listen to the way he absolutely decimates human life now. Common criminals like this unsavory crowd can best be dealt with on a purely curative basis. Kill the criminal reflex.
In the prison, Alex is offered the opportunity to experience a revolutionary new treatment for his criminality, which is called the Ludovico technique. He's injected with a drug, and they show him violent films.
Reakcija na 12.5 obećava.
Il devient un cobaye d'expérimentation pour une remise en ordre de marche, c'est une remise à jour. On soigne le mal par le mal.
One of the huge misunderstandings of the way that the novella and the film have been received is that violence is the celebration of it. Oh, I don't want to see A Clockwork Orange, it's far too violent. When actually it explores how violence is one element of a much grander picture.
Many people who read the book or watch the film only remember the first section in which most of the violence happens. They forget that it is a book about crime and punishment. And the punishment Alex receives is very severe. It's supposed to be disproportionate to the crimes he's committed. And we become aware of this bigger question of the violence of the state visited upon the individual. Now, this is where Burgess's Catholicism kicks in. The prison chaplain warns him against accepting the treatment.
Pretpostavljam da se pozivate na Ludoviku tehniku. Ne znam kako to zovete, gospodine, odgovorih. Znam samo da te brzo savlada i zasigurno te spreči da se vratiš u pređašnje stanje. Tačno tako, 6655321. Naravno, za sada se radi o eksperimentalnoj fazi. Tehnika je veoma jednostavna, ali izuzetno radikalna. Pitanje je ipak da li takva metoda zaista može da čoveka učini dobrim. Dobrota dolazi iz duše, 6655321. Dobrotu sami biramo. A kada čovek ne može da bira, on prestaje da bude čovek.
If we're free to choose, we must have things to choose between. This means that evil is a necessity. That's what A Clockwork Orange was about, the necessity of evil, which was essential to the principle of choice, principle of free choice. If we're only good, we have no choice.
The prison chaplain is probably the closest to Burgess's point of view. Burgess is a Catholic. He believes people are born in a fallen state. He believes that it's impossible. Not only is it impossible to make people good, it's undesirable because it vitiates the idea of human free will.
Godine 1961. počeo sam da pišem novelu čija je tema bila lečenje maloletničke delikvencije. Tada sam došao do podatka da postoji ideja da se kriminal može iskoreniti korišćenjem posebne vrste terapije koja bi stvorila averziju kod počinioca. Bio sam zaprepašćen.
What Berges is taking aim at here, of course, is the behaviorism of the Russian Pavlov as filtered through B.F. Skinner in the West.
Has been so well defined had his work become that Skinner was able to question traditional human concepts such as mind, soul, and the human spirit.
Well, I'm going to try to get it to do something.
Skinner believes a man feels free if he believes he is free, and he will believe he is free if he is conditioned by positive reinforcement to think so.
There we go, all the way around.
The context of the novel is that there was, especially among right-wing politicians, a tendency and an enthusiasm of using aversion therapy to cure people of all kinds of antisocial habits. For example, alcoholism, also drug addiction, also homosexuality. And this was implemented, and people were subjected to those conversion therapies to burn out the criminal impulses or the undesirable impulses that they saw around them.
Boleo me je svaki deo tela. Osjećao sam da će mi pripasti muka. Počeo sam da shvatam svu dubinu svoje nevolje. Preznojio sam se, stomak mi se prevrtao, stravična žeđ me morila, sve oko mene i u meni se raskopusalo. Zaustavite film, molim vas, stanite, ne mogu više da podnesem, zavapio sam. Ali doktor Brodski, čuo sam samo njegov glas, izgovori, da stanemo, kažeš. Zašto? Pa tek smo počeli. On i ostala bratija se zaceniše prilično glasno. U svem tom komešanju, u mom bolu i muci, tek tad primetih muziku koja se vrtela u pozadini. Bio je to Ludvig van. Stanite, zakukah. Na taj način upropastiti Ludviga vana. On nije nikom nažao učinio. Beethoven je samo komponovao muziku.
Les images, la musique qu'il a tant aimée, la violence qu'il a tant aimée, finissent par être utilisées contre lui pour tuer sa pensée.
As a consequence of the treatment, he can't witness violence or think about it without extreme feelings of panic and nausea.
The notion that our own capacity for choice is going to be limited by a force outside ourselves scares me. I feared the possibility that the state was all too ready to start taking over our brains and turning us into good little citizens without the power of choice. Turning them, in effect, into clockwork oranges. No longer organisms full of sweetness and colour and light like oranges, but machines. I feared this, and that's why I wrote the novel.
C'est toujours un peu la même mécanique, hein. C'est le révolté, si violent soit-il, qu'il soit négatif, qu'il soit haïssable ou pas, finit par être rattrapé, finit par être dompté, domestiqué et détruit.
Alex was being educated or being forced into some program. I relate to him.
It was on the 3rd of April that Ai Weiwei himself disappeared. After weeks without the release of any information, he was officially charged with tax evasion. But his supporters worried that he was actually being punished for his outspoken opinions.
2011, I've been forced into a place nobody knows where. I was blockholed and the purpose is just like in Clockwork Orange, but today is not dealing with a few punks, almost dealing with anybody have different ideas in China. So the authoritarian clearly using this so-called correctness to force anybody who has different ideas into a program to brainwash or reinstore their brain emotions, psychology restored like a computer. They put you in this 81 days of the detention. And of course, I don't know that's 81 days. I think it will be years to come. So to cut off with your any social relations, no lawyer, no family knows where you are, and you don't know where you are being located, and you don't know who is questioning you daily, and you don't know the total purpose, what they want to achieve. But still, very, very clear is you have no individual. An individual has to be announced to define every act, thinking or by himself. Otherwise, it's not a person.
Kad je spazio da ulazim, rekao je glasno: "U ovoj fazi, gospodo, predstavljamo vam našeg ispitanika. Vidite li kakva je to promena, gospodo moja?"
At the culmination of his therapy, Alex is put in front of a panel, a sort of exposed show, where he is unable to fight back.
Molim vas, moram nešto učiniti, da vam očistim čizme. Ali ovaj prikan me je samo jako šutnuo u pozadinu. U tom mi se trenu učinilo da neću osjetiti mučninu i bol ako ga zgrabim za zglavke, stisnem ga svojim ručerdama i oborim ovog groznog baticu na pod. Ali bacivši ga na tlo, osjetio sam onaj jezivi osjećaj kako me obliva, te mu brže bolje pružih svoje ručke da ga podignem. Malecki doktor Brodski izgovori: "U redu je, to je sasvim dobro." "Izbor," promrmlja duboka neka glasina. "On više nema pravo izbora, zar ne?" "To su samo finese," nasmeja se doktor Brodski. "Nas se ne tiču njihovi motivi, niti etika. Nas jedino zanima da smanjimo stopu kriminala." "Ali ja? Šta je sa mnom? Gde sam ja u svemu tome? Jesam li ja samo neki pas? Da li ću ja biti samo vaša mehanička pomorandža za ustih?" Ne znam šta me je nagnalo da upotrebim tačno te reči, braćo moja.
It's this idea of a human being literally fruit, juicy, organic, messy. And so we've got the symbolism of the orange being pure or natural, and then we've got society, the clockwork, or the sort of technology within it, or the sort of conditioning within it.
Raz, dva, tri, četiri.
Jezik kojim smo se služili i u knjizi i u filmu jeste nadsat, izmišljen sleng, mangupski govor, jezik polusveta. Želeo sam da paklenu pomorandžu oblikujem između ostalog u primjer toga kako se neko može indoktrinirati. Kada pročitate moju knjigu ili pogledate film, na kraju bi trebalo da vladate minimalnim brojem reči i termina iz ruskog jezika i sve to bez imalo truda ili iznenađenja. Poznavanje nekih reči bi vam se uvuklo pod kožu ponavljanjem. Na taj način funkcioniše i indoktrinacija.
The author predicted the future very well, and the reality is everywhere today. It's in much larger scale. It's not just China or North Korea or Cuba. United States is authoritarian states. It's a cooperative authoritarian states. People being brainwashed, people being punished, people being re-educated. And this is our modern state of mind.
One thing is certain. The full potentialities of the human organism have not yet been realized. Educators and psychologists alike.
Svi mi se možemo složiti sa profesorom Skinnerom da je društvo koje je pod valjanom upravom zapravo uslovljeno društvo. Samim tim imamo idealno tlo za nastanak nove strukture ljudi koji su racionalno uvereni da moraju biti uslovljeni, sve dok god se ta uslovljenost zasniva na nagradama, a ne na kaznama. Da li je sloboda izbora zaista toliko važna? I da li je čovek sposoban za to? Da li nam je sloboda uopšte urođena?
Berđes anticipates the way in which liberal societies like ours transform the idea of individual free will into the idea of a set of choices, the Elysian between product advertising and consumer choice and political choice. Because that dystopic idea, you know, is already present in the English dystopic writing of the generation before Berđes. You know, he's following after Huxley's Brave New World, Orwell's 1984, and again, at the core of 1984 is the idea of conditioning.
Za većinu nas, život otkucava tačno kao budilnik. Sazrevamo, naučeni na ritam koji nam je nametnut potrebom da preživimo. Ubrzo naviknuti, mi počinjemo da volimo svoje okove.
This novel is still controversial. Like this sort of like almost Brechtian slap to society to go, wake up, you know. People from certainly the generations beneath me are taking climate change incredibly seriously and accusing the generations that have gone by of destroying their lives, much as Alex does to the old woman in Clockwork, and saying, "You've ruined us. We can't fix your mess, so you have to pay now."
Above me you see a pyramid which may be taken to represent the state, culminating in this point of power high up in the sky. The Romans accepted it just as our own century has accepted it. But there have to be dissidents, there have to be odd individuals who stand out against this pyramidal power, and such individuals existed even in the Roman Empire. People who said no, people who laughed at this image of power, chiefly, of course, the poets.
We felt the story belongs to us, you know, to the whole punk scene, really. And it felt like a mirror to us. Reading the book, that opened our eyes actually to what Berđes really meant. How to work on characters, how to keep society going, how to keep them on a chain. The fight actually for individuality and the fight to break the rules of a society and the cost of doing that. There's something bad in all of us, and maybe there's something good and something nice in all of us too. And it's always the question, which part of you is going to take the lead? And maybe that is why we find ourselves in the character of Alex, because we all know we got something bad in ourselves.
The novel presents us with two possible endings. When he sent the book to his publishers, he sent it with a note that said, at the end of chapter 20, should we end here? Berđes refuses to resolve it himself. He hands over that decision to his editors. This is very unusual in the history of literature, and the reason why the novel is published in two different forms in London and New York is because his two editors have answered that question in different ways. The American editor decided to end the novel at chapter 20. The last words are, "I was cured all right," because he preferred the pessimistic version in which Alex is cured of the conditioning and he's gone back to being evil. When the film came out, it followed the American edition, omitting chapter 21.
The film sees him sit back into crime and perversion and hedonism. It's very Hollywood.
Now, in the 21st chapter, he decides he's going to settle down, he's looking for a wife, he wants to have a child, and he says that violence is part of youth. It's just part of being young.
Mladost mora da prođe, da. Biti mlad je kao da ste jedna od ovih malenkih mašina. Sine moj, moj sine. Kad budem imao sina, sve ću mu objasniti. Ali pre svega, braćo, treba naći neku devušku ili bar neku koja će biti majka tome sinu. Moram time već sutra da se pozabavim. Zato, s Bogom, pozdravlja vas vaš drugar. Ali vi, braćo moja, setite se ponekad vašeg Aleksa kakav nekad beše. Amen. I sve što ide uz to.
At the end of A Clockwork Orange, you have to, as a reader, make your own decisions, because at the end you're given this sort of dilemma. Do you choose to stay with that penultimate chapter with Alex, who has gone back to the way he was? Bad Alex. Or do you carry on reading and understand that that was just part of growing up? The truth of the matter is, it's your choice, and it's a morality piece.
Berđes himself said, this is a novel about free will, which allows you, at the end, to choose which ending you want.
On je bio kisela narandža. Sada dopunjuje svoju pulpu nečim što ima pristojnu, ljudsku slatkoću. Jednog dana Alex će postati stvaralac, umetnik. To je već vidljivo u njegovoj ljubavi prema muzici. Amerika je uvek preferirala onaj drugi, nasilniji kraj romana. Ko sam ja da tvrdim da Amerika greši? Sve je to samo stvar pojedinačnog izbora.